Okay, and then I'm going to mute everybody. Okay, and share my screen. And this is, those who haven't joined before, this is fairly informal. So if you have a question or an issue, feel free to unmute yourself and ask the question, and we'll go from there. Otherwise, I guess we're ready to go. So tell me if you can't see my Photoshop screen. So in the past, we've gone through quite a few things, and we're going to be talking about the last 4 layer styles today. If you remember, we have already talked about the blending options here and what all of these things do. And again, for those of you that haven't been involved in this in the past, this is available on a recording if you want to go watch those. But we've talked about bevel and emboss and the contour and texture that's associated with it. We talked about creating a stroke, inner shadow, inner glow, satin, and color overlay. We talked about those last time. This time we're going to talk about gradient overlay, pattern overlay, outer glow, and drop shadow, and how you can use those. I usually use those with text, but you can use them on any kind of a layer that primarily is extracted and put on a new layer so that you have it separated from the background. But I'm going to show you using text, and then I'll show you also using a ball or a round circle to give you an idea of how these things work. So after we're done talking about these 4, and we've had any questions, we're going to move on, and I'm going to talk about channels. I think Robin had asked me to talk about channels, so I'm going to talk about it probably a lot more than she really wanted. But I thought it would be kind of interesting to go through what channels are and how you can use those to your advantage, the different ways that you can use channels. So we'll talk about that as well. And then next time, which is August 27th, what we'll do is we'll come in here and I'll create a bunch of examples to show you how to use combinations of these layer styles and how to save them so that you can use them in the future and that sort of thing. So we'll talk about that next time. But I didn't want to do that this time because I didn't want to give you too much overload on the styles, because you really need to kind of get an idea of how to use these before we start combining them and everything, okay? So we're going to start with the gradient overlay, and if you click on the gradient overlay, it's going to pull in here the properties from what is the default or what you used last time. And since I've already created a gradient overlay for this, it's pulling in what I did before. Now most of these, in fact I think all of them, use blend modes if you want to use blend mode. You can always use normal if you want to, but I'm using the screen blend mode. Now you can use, I'm not going to belabor this, but you could use, multiply, you can use soft light, you can use different kind of blend modes here to really give it that look that you're looking for. I kind of like this soft light because it gives it kind of a metal look. It looks like this middle part is pushing out towards you. But the blend mode is something that you just have to kind of play with and get the look you want. I'm going to put it back on screen for now. The dither check over here, when you're using gradients, a lot of times you get banding in the area where it's doing its gradation. So if you click on the dither, it tries to reduce that. So I always have the dither checked. I don't know why it's even an option. I would assume everybody would not want that banding, but that's what that's for. The opacity is exactly what it sounds like. You can bring it up or bring it down so that you get, again, the look you're looking for. And the gradient here, we did a thing on gradients. We talked about those a few months ago. And basically this is the same thing. If you just click inside this gradient, it brings up the gradient editor. And with this gradient editor, it comes with a lot of presets in here. The default is black to white. And it's the same thing as your gradient map that we have down here in the adjustment layers, where you can create a gradient map adjustment layer. And when you do that, you can open the gradient editor as well. But in this instance, it's got black to white. And I'm not going to go too much into this, but if you wanted to change the colors, you just click on this stop here and come down here and change this color to like red or something, to whatever color you want, and you have that gradient that changes from that color. I'm going to leave it the way it is for now, but that's kind of the way the gradients work. And again, if you want, we can have a recap on this at some point if we need to, but there is a recording where we talked about gradients in the past, okay? Because you can create some pretty complicated gradients, like ones with 3 and 4 different colors and that sort of thing. So anyway, you have the gradient here that you can select from. Then you have this little reverse thing, and all that does is it changes it from the white being into the middle to the white being on the outside, or the shadows and the highlights being switched. So I like it this way. To me, that looks pretty cool. Align with layer is basically, let me turn that off and I'll show you what happens. It's going to change it to where it looks different. And what happens is this band becomes a lot bigger. You'll have to change the size of it. But basically the red now is way up here and way down here. But if you select that and then you move this around, you can see that that's what's happened. And if you say that you do want to align with layers and you click it, then it brings it back down to wherever that is, so that when you move that layer around, it moves along with it. And that's all that is. I always leave that checked, but it just depends on what you're wanting to do. Now the style here, I'm using reflected. There are 5 other styles, or 4 other styles that are here. Linear is one that I use all the time as well, and it's just basically a linear gradient, just like it sounds. It goes directly from white to red in this case. Again, we're using screen blend mode, and it's using white and black, but it's blending them with the screen blend mode. That's why it goes back to red up here instead of black. But you can change the angle of this just by grabbing this and moving it. Now you've got an angle of the gradient going this way. You can move it over here. You can move it down under here. You can move it whatever makes the most sense. Or you can just type in the angle that you want. So if I just go 90, it goes back to the way it was. So that's the way that works. The scale is how big do you want that. No, I didn't go over the others. Let me go over the others here. Here's radial. Radial is a circle. You can just barely see the little circle in the middle because it takes the entire thing into account. So radial on lettering like this doesn't make a lot of sense. We'll look at radial here in just a second, but that's kind of the way that works. And you can grow it to make it bigger like this if you wanted to have a big circle in the middle like that. Then you have angle. Angle is kind of hard to see on here. I'll show you that again here in just a second. Reflected is what I had like this, and then you have diamond. And diamond is basically a diamond just like it shows. Let me make it bigger. So there's your diamond like that. And we'll look at those. I have a circle here we're going to look at in just a second, but I want to show you the lettering here first. So if we go back to reflected and make this come down here like this, that's what the scale is down here. It's how big do you want that gradient to be. So if you bring it up or bring it down, you can make it as small as this, or you can make it wide like this. So it's just a matter of what you're looking for it to do. Okay, and that is really all there is to a gradient overlay. I went over that extremely fast. Let me show you, let's turn this one off and turn this one on, and turn these off. We're going to turn on this gradient. So I have this gradient overlay on this circle here. It's a linear gradient right now. If I change it, oops, sorry. If I change it to radial, it now looks like this. So this is your radial, and I could make that small, or I can make it pretty big. I can change those colors. I've got yellow in there right now, but you can change this. I can go back to black down here, say okay, and change this to white. Now we have black and white that's in here, and you could make it something like this, bring the opacity down. It's pretty ugly, but there it is. It's black and white with a screen overlay. Let's change that to multiply, just see what we get. That's too much. Let's go down here to soft light. And you just have to kind of play with what you're looking for. So you get something like this. You just kind of play around. The angle is this. It goes around like this. So it's gradating like that. Let me do the reverse. Maybe that's what's going on with the radial. Still doesn't matter. So you can make it kind of big like that. So anyway, the diamond is this little diamond here. We can bring that down. Bring it up like that so you can really see it. That's the shape that you get with the diamond gradient overlay. So that's really all there is. And all of these, you just have to kind of play around to get that look you're looking for. As long as you know, you can create your own gradient in here, come in here and make your own, the colors, what you want them. And then you have the styles. And in my case, I like the reflected style. Here on the circle, it just looks like it's kind of bent. You have this part of it closer to you and these parts further away. And then you have, linear. So as long as you understand, use a blend mode, take that opacity up or down, gradient, and what kind of style are you looking to do. And then you can either turn it if you need to, and then how big do you want it? And that's pretty much all there is. So I typically use it for text because I'm doing posters and banners, and I like to have something really cool in their name or whatever. So I usually come up with something using a gradient of reflected and then some of the other layer styles to make it look cool. So that was pretty fast for gradient overlay, but that's really pretty much all there is to it. Are there any questions about that? No questions. Okay. Then we'll move forward. Let me get a little bit of a line here. Okay. Now we're going to talk about pattern overlay. Pattern overlay is something that I really don't use, but it has some kind of cool stuff. Excuse me, cool stuff in it. You can see here that it puts a pattern on here, exactly like it sounds like. I have used color burn here because I thought color burn looked pretty good, but you could use multiply. Multiply, you'd have to take the opacity up a little bit to bring this color out. Looks kind of like marble or something like that, or granite or something. But again, you have the blend mode and the opacity. But then you have your patterns. And these patterns are what comes seated in Photoshop. And you've got quite a few different things here. Again, I really don't ever use this. I use texture instead, and I just clip it to the lettering. But this is something that you can, if you want to give it a shot, can put a particular look on your letters. And I think this actually looks pretty cool myself. And you can always click on this little gear thing and import your own patterns. So if you've got textures out there that you want to bring in, you can bring some textures in here and create them as patterns and then use them in this manner. Snap to origin snap to origin and link to layer work together. So if I say link with layer is turned off, and then I do this, and I take the lettering and I move it around, notice how that texture is staying static. I don't know if you can see that. Let me make it a little bigger there. If I move it around, that texture is not moving with it. It's staying like it is. So if I do that, and then I come in here and say snap to origin, it brings that texture back to the way it was to start with. Typically, I'll leave that, and I'll never use that. Like I said, I never use pattern overlay anyway, but I would leave it and link with layer. And now again, when I move it around, noticed how that texture does not move, or that pattern does not move. But that's all that is. Oops, that's all that is. Okay, click here. And again, we have angle, and you can turn the angle on that. And let's try a different texture. Let's try this one. You have this texture in there, and you can see that, oops, let me open that up again. You can see that the texture looks like this, but I've got it at 106 degrees, so it's turned. So in this case, I could turn it over this way. I could make it 90 degrees, and it's like this. So that's all the angle does, is it turns your pattern, you know, back and forth, which is kind of a no-brainer for you. And then we have the scale. How small do we want that? See, I can bring it down. It looks kind of like this. And now I've got it down 71. You can't even see it. You have to really zoom in to see it. So now there it is. So you have the ability here to add a texture to your lettering and give it a different look. Again, I'm not crazy about this texture, but you have, you know, this granite type texture here. And then if I bring the scale up here, it looks kind of like this, and bring it up even more, and it looks a little bit like granite or something like that. So that's kind of cool right there. And that's all there is to that. I mean, pretty simple. Any questions on that part? No questions, okay? We're going to be moving along here, and we may be done before you know it. Outer glow, I'm going to click on that. We're going to turn that one on. Outer glow is the exact same thing as inner glow, except it's on the outside. You know, we went through inner glow last time, and you have almost the exact information here that you had for inner glow. But basically, you know, again, a blend mode, opacity, and then you have noise here. A lot of times, you know, if you want to put some kind of a glow on it like this, you can increase the noise here and give it kind of a different kind of look. That's a little bit much there, but you can see the noise that you can add in there, and you may want to just add a, you know, just a little bit to give it that kind of look. I think that's kind of nice. Then here you have the ability to not just use a color, but to use a gradient again. So if I select the gradient, I can come in here and change the colors to whatever I want it to be. And this one is basically red to transparent. You can also create your gradient to do that. So it goes where it's just red and it fades out to nothing. And that's the way that this one is set up. So if I select that, you notice that it didn't really change very much. But what you can do is come down here and work these other issues to make it look a little bit different, or these other elements, I mean. So down here, let me make this word small, so you can see that. Down here we have a techniques, and your technique is either softer or precise. And you just have to look at each one to understand the difference. I'm not sure why they named them that, because precise to me doesn't look so precise. But you have softer that squeezes it in like that, and then precise that pushes it out a little bit. Then you have the spread and the size, and they sound like kind of the same thing, but they are a lot different. The spread is how far you're going to push that gradient out. In this case, a gradient. The other one was just the color. How far are you going to push that out? You just keep going like that, and you can see that you finally get to a harder area around it like this. Bring it back. The size really is the size. Push this out here, it becomes really big. Out here, it becomes a lot bigger. And you begin to lose your definition when you push it out here too far. So you just have to, you know, I say this over and over and over, but you really just have to kind of play with it and get the look that you want. In this case, I'm thinking something in here like this. Give it a little bit of an outer glow like that. The bottom part down here, again, it's the same quality that we have up here in Bevel and Emboss and that we have with the inner glow. it's the contour of that glow. And I typically, these are just, I said it before, but these are just like curves layers. So if you're familiar with curves, as a curves adjustment, this is the same thing. If I double click on it, it opens up this mapping editor here. And basically this is just a linear curve from black to white. And this represents the shadows or the blacks. If you're going linear like this represents blacks, this represents whites or highlights. So you have your highlights, and if you bring this down, it becomes more black. If you bring this up, it becomes more white. If I took this and made it like this, it becomes non-existent. So it doesn't make any difference. So anyway, you just have to, you can play with this curve here. If you understand curves, then you can play with these and understand what they're doing. But I don't pay any much attention to that because I know the look I'm going for. And what you have to do is come in and make your change and then come back here and adjust all of these to affect that change the way you want it. So I typically, and I've said this before too, I like the ones that are more linear. Like this one is similar to that. This one is similar to that. So these are the ones that I typically will look at. I'll look and say, how much does that change it the way I want it? And you can see that it gives it some pretty radical differences. The Twin Peaks over here, I usually just look at that to see what it does, and it kind of gives it an interesting look that you might want to use. But if I already know in the back of my mind what I'm looking for, I already know that I'm going to use this one. If I'm not sure what I want, then I'll create something and then come in here and run through all of these to see what it gives me. It might give me something. I may look at this and go, oh, wow, that is cool. That's what I want to use. But typically, I already know what I want to do, and I typically will stick with this linear, this first contour. The range, in regard to anti-alias, it tries to remove the artifacts around edges, which is aliasing. So if you turn that off, it doesn't do that. If you turn it on again, I don't know why it's even an option, because I definitely want it not to create those. The range is kind of like the size, where you can move it around and it does some weird stuff. So you can just kind of play with that too and see if it gives you what you're looking for. And jitter is basically noise. It's pretty much the same as the noise slider, except jitter only works with the gradient. So you don't even use it unless you're working with the gradient here. And it adds a little bit of noise in there. Jitter, basically, if you think about brushes, and I want to talk about brushes probably in the next 1 or 2 sessions, I want to talk about creating brushes. Jitter is one of the things in the brush attributes that you can set. And what I'm going to tell you is replace jitter with change, because basically if you're talking about size jitter, you're talking about size change. If you're talking about angle jitter, you're talking about angle change. So I think of jitter as just changing. In this case, it kind of gives you a little bit of a noise look in there because it spreads those dots out a little bit. But that is pretty much it on the outer glow. I use the outer glow. I don't really use it in my letters very much, but I'll use it a little bit when I'm doing compositing on figures that I put in there. So if I want to add a little bit of maybe some rim light or something, I can use the outer glow to add a little bit of rim light along the edge to give somebody a look. And so I don't use it a lot here, but this is kind of how it works. And I can change, again, we go to screen, and it gives you a different look. So now you have, looks like a light behind it that's bouncing on it. And I would try it, unless I already know, like I said, if I know the look I'm going for, then I pretty much know that I'm either going to go with multiplier screen. But you have soft light, and it actually gives you a little bit of that orange in the background along with that. So this red blended with that orange gives you kind of an interesting look. But outer glow is pretty, it's pretty simple. It's a lot like the inner glow. And what I want to do now is show you this right here. And I'm going to turn this off and turn these on. You can create stuff like this with the inner glow and the outer glow. And I'm thinking that, you know, I wanted to create something like a solar eclipse. And this is not really there, but it's something that is kind of interesting like that. It's probably a little too dark around here, but it's kind of a, you know, that's what you can do. A little bit of inner glow in here like this, and then a little bit of outer glow to give it that look like the earth in between, I mean, the shadow onto the sun. So all I did was I created this inner glow right here, and I gave it a little bit of a color of screen, and added just a little bit of area here. I used the softer, I used edge. This is one thing that's different than the outer glow. It has a center and an edge, and it calls it choke and size. And so these are the only thing that's really too different from the outer glow. But you can see I gave it I just played with these sliders until I got the look here that I wanted. And then I went to outer glow, and I gave it this color here with screen, and it blended that color, and I kept moving that color around until I got what I wanted, because it's blending this color with this orange in the background, and it's using screen to blend mode to do that. So you just, you know, this is just something that you can create with a little bit of practice or a little bit of moving the sliders back and forth. I knew I wanted screen because I wanted it to be bright, or it didn't have to be screen, but needed to be something like one of these. That's kind of interesting. Color dodge or linear dodge gives it, maybe linear dodge is even better, gives it a brighter look. But anyway, that's something that you can do, combining inner glow and outer glow. So I just thought I would show you that. Any questions on outer glow? Are we still there?
Yep, no questions.
Okay. So now we're going to talk about drop shadow. And drop shadow is really easy, really simple. I'm going to turn off outer glow because outer glow and drop shadow together really don't work. I mean, I guess you could do it, but to me it doesn't make sense. We're going to turn off outer glow and turn on drop shadow. Double click on it there. And drop shadow is one of these, and I have this on linear burn, but you can select whatever. You know, a lot of times you might want to just select normal and go with normal. And that looks pretty cool too. I selected linear burn because, let's see, yeah, linear burn, because it gives it that little bit of an outline right there that gives it that burn look. And I just thought that was kind of cool. And again, the opacity, you can turn that opacity down to give it just a little bit less of that. And you have this color that kind of blends in really well with this orange in the background. So, but I could have chosen that. I'm choosing black here that I'm using for my drop shadow, but you can change that color to be whatever you want. And this is one way to do it. Instead of changing black, you just change your blend mode. So that's the, you know, just have to play with those again. I said that at least 5 times today, but I say it over and over. You just have to kind of play with these to get that look. If you have an idea of what you want, go and start playing with the sliders until you get what you're looking for. Again, the opacity is just, I've got it at 30% here. It needs less for linear burn than it does for normal, because normal is, you know, it's just black, you know, on top of this orange. But linear burn is actually blending the color along with it, so it burns it in there. And it's a darken mode too, so it's going to darken it. The angle here is basically, you know, whatever angle you want the light to come from. It's coming from upper left to lower right in this instance. But you can change that however you want and have the light coming from whatever direction you want. You can also come over here and click and drag it where you want it. I don't typically do this for precise, but I can do it, you know, to get it kind of in place. And then I may move this a little bit in the distance. I don't know if you noticed, but look over here where my cursor is, over here in the layer style. And as I move it around, notice that the distance changes and the angle changes because you're changing the distance as well as what angle the light's coming from. So you can do it by moving it, or you can just do it yourself by pulling this down. It moves it up, pushing it out, moves it out. Spread is exactly what it sounds like. It's how far do you want to, how big basically do you want to make that back lettering? In this case, if you go way up here, it makes it really big. Come on. There we go. Makes it really big and really defined. I don't really like that. I like it a little bit more in line with the actual letters. So I usually have it around 50%. The size is then how big of a reflection you have. So you've got a really huge soft reflection or a really small hard edge reflection. So that really kind of lets you decide how much you want to diffuse those edges. So those three right there, actually with the angle, are you just have to kind of use them to see what you want. Again, the size works with how sharp the edge is. The spread is how far out it goes. And then the distance is how far, if you can think of bringing those letters back towards you. If you bring those letters back towards you, then there you go. The distance becomes greater. If you push the letters in, then the distance becomes a lot less. So that's kind of how that works. So just have to kind of get that look that you're looking for. And then again, you have the same thing down here that you had before with the contour. If you like what you have here, then you're done. I usually play with it with this on. If you want to start down here, you could actually start down here and get a look like this and go, oh, I like that. And then come up here and start playing with this stuff and get it where you want it. So you can do that sort of thing. I don't particularly like that look, but it depends on how you want to approach it. So we click here. Then you get anti-alias is turned off. I'm not sure why, but you get this look with some outline around it. Got this bigger Twin Peaks here, I call it. And then you could play with your spread and a little bit more distance here and add some noise. So if you come in here and look, you can see that there's a little bit of noise around the edges. Now, again, this is not my cup of tea, so I can come here and you get something a little bit more defined. So my computer's not cooperating. Come on, back up. Okay, let's try again. There we go. Okay, so there we go. So drop shadow is pretty straightforward, but that is pretty much it. If you want, you can just grab here and drag it to where you want it. And that's pretty much it. Now, layer knocks out drop shadow. If you remember the difference between fill and opacity, this is going to make a lot more sense. If I turn this off and I come down here, remember that opacity brings your layer all the way down eventually to nothing. Okay, fill brings everything down except layer styles. So if you bring your fill down here and I bring it all the way down, this shadow is showing inside your letters. So instead of doing that, if I click on drop shadow and click this little checkbox, now it doesn't show through. So that's all that thing does. Now we bring fill back up and you get your red letters back in there. So if once again, if I take fill all the way down to 0, you notice there's no red. That's because the letters here are gone. What you're seeing here is the pattern, the pattern overlay along with the gradient overlay, along with the drop shadow. That's all you're seeing. You're not seeing the actual lettering itself because I've turned it off with this fill at 0. When I push it back up to 100, now that red comes back because the letters have come back. So now you see the red. So that's the difference between fill and opacity. Okay, and drop shadow, that right there controls whether the drop shadow shows through the other layer styles. And I like for it to be knocked out. I mean, I rarely use this fill anyway. Okay, any questions about any of these now that we're pretty much done with the layer styles? Any questions about any of this?
Could you do that knockout one more time? I
Sure.
got the hierarchy until you got to the very last one.
Okay, so drop shadow, if you remember fill, if you bring fill all the way down, all you're going to see is the layer styles. Okay, so if I come here and I take that out, this says layer knocks out drop shadow. That means it's knocking out the drop shadow as it comes around here, so that it is not on top of, or it's not showing through these other layer styles. If I turn this off, now that drop shadow shows through.
Okay.
And that's what that does.
Okay.
Okay. I always leave that turned on because I rarely use fill anyway, but that's all that is. Okay. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. I was asked to talk about channels. So now remember that next time we'll talk about some other examples where I do more combinations. I just thought that this made sense to just kind of go right down the row here, doing it all on the same object. And why I used the orange background because I wanted to show you that other effect with the inner glow and outer glow. That's why we have an orange background here. But anyway, we will talk about that next time. Okay. So what I want to do now is talk about channels. And Robin has asked me to revisit channels, and I want to talk about channels in a few different ways. And it's probably going to be, you're probably going to go, oh yeah, I know that, I know that, I know that. But I need to kind of lay a foundation for what I really want to talk about with channels. So we're going to start with this image here. And this is an image, Ron, you'll appreciate this. This is an image we took at, or I took at in Missouri on our insane trip to Missouri. And what I want to do here is just talk about channels. And to do that, I'm going to open up some panels. I'm going to open the histogram panel here and put it over here. And I am going to open the info panel here. And I use the info panel quite a bit. And then I'm going to open color picker channel, or color picker here. And first off, when we're talking about channels, we're talking about the different colors that are being used to mix to come up with all the colors that you see in this image. So in our instance, 99.9% of us are going to be using RGB. But there are those of us that use CMYK. And typically when you use CMYK, it's because your lab has asked you to send them a CMYK image. I don't know of any other reason why you would want to use CMYK. I'm sure there are reasons out there. I just don't know what they are. But the typical thing to think about with channels is your red channel, your green channel, and your blue channel, right? RGB. No brainer, makes sense. Now I want you to look at this. I'm looking at the info panel over here. I hope you can see my cursor that I'm circling around. Actually, you know what? I'm going to, bear with me. I'm going to make my cursor a lot bigger. So I'm going to go in here, go to display cursor, and let's make my cursor big so you can see it. It's not good for working with Photoshop, but it'll be a lot better for you to be able to see my cursor. There we go. So RGB, whenever I hover over something, you'll see the values pop up here. So if I see all those numbers changing all over the place. So if I hover over a color and stop, it's looking at a particular pixel and it's telling me over there that red is 166, green is 185, and blue is 70. So what does that mean? Well, what that means is that if you look up here at the histogram, each one of those values is somewhere on the histogram from 0 to 255. So now I've also, every time I move my cursor, I get a different value. So what I'm going to do is one more thing. Over here in the toolbar, there is a, come on, I'm clicking and nothing's happening. There is a thing called color sampler. Okay. Well, let's see if this, no, I'm not sure why it's not opening. So let's go in here. Nothing's happening. Oh, it's because I have this open. Okay, let me close that for a second. Okay, we're going to get the color sampler tool. And what this does is whenever I find something over here that I want to sample, I just click on it and it gives me that value and it records it over here. So we're going to use these values over here. And what this is telling me is that I have red of 165. Well, 165 is going to be over in here somewhere. So if you think about 128 is your 50% gray, that's your mid-tone. So 165 is about what, 40, almost 40, whatever you call it, units closer to white than middle gray. So it's getting over close to the highlight area. So it's right on the border of being between, a mid-tone or a highlight. So it's going to be one of these lighter colors. Whoops, sorry about that. 172 is green, so that's even lighter. So you have a lighter color of green that's getting close to your highlights. And then you have 77 blue, so that's a darker color. That's going to be, if you think 92 is your middle of your midtones from 128 down to your darks or your blacks or shadows. So 77 is fairly dark blue. So you have a light green, light red, a light green, and a dark blue. So if we come over here, let's see, and I learned how to do this earlier today, so let me see if I can make this work. There we go. Zoom in here. If you look at where I am here, I am on a lighter, kind of a light green. I have selected something that is part of one of these trees. It's, green leaves on these trees. So now, let's see, get out of this. If I come in here and use my color picker, and I go down here to red, and I put in 165, and green, I put in 172, and blue, I put in 77, it gives me this green color. And that is what I have selected over here. So this is telling me that I have a predominantly red, or predominantly green, I'm sorry, predominantly green color. It's 172, but very high in red tone. But what's the opposite of blue is yellow. So it's telling me it's a little bit yellow because it's not is close to these tones. So it's a yellow, kind of a yellow green. So anyway, it's kind of given me what the values are. So that's important. And that's important because of some of the things we're going to talk about here in just a moment. But I wanted you to understand that everywhere I go over here and make another, I'm going to select here in the dark green. And now we have, this is number 2. You can see over here it says number 2. Now I have 77 red, 90 green, and 44 blue. So now I have a much lower value of red, much lower value of all of them. That's because it's a darker green. So if I zoom in here, see if I can do that. If I zoom in here, you can see that I have clicked on this little darker green area. So this is important because of a couple of things. First off, it tells me what is the dominant color in here. If I come over here and click on this white, this is supposed to be white, right? So I click on that, and now I have number 3, and I have 154, 171, 189. 189 is blue, so it has a blue tint to it. So it's not necessarily white, it has a blue tint to it. Okay, why is that important? That's important because if you want to change that to be the color that you want, or remove this blue tint, then you need to reduce that blue. Now, in this case, I'm not going to change anything because I like this picture the way it is. But let's go to another picture. Come on. Oh, I got it. And we got the beach ball, so let's give it a minute here. But the idea here is, okay, here we go. This is a picture that I shot back in June. I'm going to go to my move tool. I'm going to zoom in here, and we're going to look at this. And there are, you can tell that there's a lot of blue in this picture. So fortunately, I shot a gray card so that I was able to get really nice skin tones here. But what you can do is look in here and do some color samples of things that are supposed to be neutral. Now, what is neutral? I didn't mention that a minute ago. Neutral means that all of the values are the same. So you don't have a dominance of any color. So it goes from 0 to 255. If all of them are 0, that means it's pure black. If all of them are 255, that means it's pure white. Anything in between where the numbers are the same means that they're a shade of gray. So if I look in here and I see something that I think should be neutral, and I can come in here and find something that looks like it should be neutral, and maybe something, it's kind of hard because something that looks neutral may actually be a little bit gray. I think this is something that's supposed to be white. So I click on that, and now I get 175, 174, and 162, which tells me that that color has a little bit of yellow tint to it. So if I wanted to correct the value of that so that it was white or a neutral color, I would need to increase the blue in order to match these others. So I would need to add about 14 units or about 12, 13 units to the blue to bring it up to 175 or 174. Now, again, I like the color here, so I'm not going to mess with it, but that's kind of how you can look at this. If you see something, I know there's something in here. Let's take his pants, for example. His pants should be pretty close to a neutral color because they're kind of an off-white. So if I click there, you have 218, 218, 216. So it's telling me that my color is correct because I know that these are supposed to be a neutral color. So most of you are shooting landscapes and you don't really worry too much about getting your colors correct. But when you're shooting people, it's very important to get your colors right so that their skin tones are correct. And you can see that his skin tones look very good. So I would not touch this for this particular image. So let's go to another image. Now here he is against his car. And in his car, or with this, we have a gray suit. We have a gray car. We have a white shirt. So we have a lot of things in here that we could test. I'm going to use his shirt right here. And I'm going to click right there. And now I get 247, 243, 242. So it's telling me there's a little bit of a red tint to the image. So I'm going to go ahead and make a correction, and I'm going to show you how I make this correction. It's pretty simple. You can do it with layers. This one actually I've already done it here, but I'm going to do it again to show you. If I go to levels and I come in here, and what I'm going to do, you look at these numbers, I'm going to go to the highest value. So I'm going to change green to be 247, and I'm going to change blue to be 247. So what you do is you come in here, and I'm going to change green first, and I'm going to pull this down. Whoops, there we go. Pull it down. It's at 246. Now you could actually just put a number in here too. So we'll just kind of go, there we go. So now my green is at 247, right? So now I'm going to go to my blue channel, and I'm going to change my blue channel in there as well. So that's 244, 247 right there. So now all of these are 247, which is telling me, okay, now I have changed the entire image based on this one pixel. So now if I look at it and I turn it off, turn it on, you can see it's very, very subtle. Let me come in here so you can see it a little bit better. You can see if I turn this off, a little bit of red there, turn it back on, and that red is gone. You're now where you need to be. So that is one way that you can work with channels. And I thought that would be just, and you don't have to understand really how to do this, just kind of understand the concept that anything that is a neutral color, like this right here, is kind of a gray. You can see it's pretty close here. It needs a little bit more red for that. Or I could go to his suit. Now his suit has a little bit of weave to it, so it's going to have a little bit of different colors in there, some lighter and darker grays. But in general, if I click on that, I have 102, 101, 100. So they're very, very close. And so you would say, okay, the color on that is really pretty good. So the idea is to know that, to see, looking at your channels, that you can see whenever you have a color cast. Okay. Now I've gone along here and hadn't asked if there are any questions. Do I have any questions so far?
Hey, Bob, is this the technique that folks use when they try to copy Hollywood's color grading? When they're taking their shadows to blues and their highlights to yellow?
I don't know if they use this technique, because you can, yeah, I mean, you can look at those and kind of, I would use probably a gradient map to do something like that, and then just kind of go for the, the highlights and the shadows based on that. But this is more for color correcting, for if you have a red cast or a blue cast or a green cast or something like that. If you look at your image and you can see something that should be a neutral color and you see that it's not, you may not even see it. You may not even notice it when you're looking at it.
Until you try it, right?
Yeah, and if you are shooting people and you look at it and you go, okay, that looks really good, and then you come back tomorrow and you go, what's wrong with that picture? Something wrong. And if you try to do your white balance manually without anything, like in Lightroom, where you just go click on different things and you go, oh, that looks good, and you're done. This way, that the skin tones are right. Now, typically, what happens though, when you really have a problem with this, is if you don't have anything in your image that is supposed to be neutral, that is neutral. And that's one reason why shooting a gray card is a good idea.
Yeah.
So and it doesn't have to be white, it could be dark. I could have chosen like this tire down here or something, that maybe these letters here in the license plate, or this black thing here. If you know that it's supposed to be neutral, you click on it and see what it shows you, and then if you have a color cast. And then this is the way that I learned how to correct it. So
that's good to know. I've always kind of wondered about how to correct something like that. This is very useful.
Well, good. I was hoping that, I've shown this before. In fact, Ron, I don't know if you probably remember, but my very first presentation for the club was showing how to do this. And when I was done, I was so proud of myself, and I turned around and everybody's kind of going, huh? What is that? show me that again. So if you just understand the concept, you know, that's what's important.
I think it's one of the easier things in Photoshop, actually. But I know a lot of people say it's black magic. But to me, it's. But I always look for another use besides the obvious.
Yeah, exactly.
And you know, the only time I've used it, and I don't do a lot of Photoshop. The only time I use it is dealing with those crazy color scans. You have some picture from the 80s that is missing. What is it normally missing? Is it missing blues? Well, some of them look purple. Some of them they're missing reds. Right. And I use it for that when I just can't make it work in Lightroom. The channel specific, or with the RGB specific tone curve.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to do it in Lightroom unless you do have up above. I know in Camera Raw, but I'm not sure in Lightroom where it is. But in Camera Raw, up above the histogram is your RGB values, and as you move your cursor around, you can see those change. And if you just hold your cursor over something that's supposed to be neutral, you can look at those values.
Look at it,
and see if there's a tint. And if there is a tint, then you can go to your curves, or you can go to any number of methods and push down that color that's dominant. So,
but this is one of those things, one of the few things that I think that are much faster in Photoshop than Lightroom dealing with, because the curves with that is a little bit funky.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is the best thing to do is shoot a gray card, and then you just click on it with your white balance tool and you're good, because you know that that's supposed to be neutral. And that's what I try to do. But in an instance like this, where I've shot this senior and I'm going all over the place and shooting, I didn't always shoot a gray card in the same light. So, you know, if you change your light, you got to change your gray card, because you may have a different color cast on it. And I don't always do that. So in this case, I had several different places that I could go and look, and very slight change to what I had already done. And that's what I did in whenever I retouched this to send to the client. So, I mean, this is something I learned a long time ago, and it's bailed me out many times. And the thing that I used as an example when I was showing it to the photo club back in 2016, I think it was, I used an iPhone picture, and that iPhone picture was awful. And I was able to bring back a lot of good color by using this technique to bring back the white balance to where it's supposed to be. So, I mean, you don't just use it on, you use it on any kind of an image. So anyway, any other questions on this? Okay, so now we're going to do something a little different with channels. I'm going to close the info panel. I'm going to close this histogram. And we're going to go to a landscape image. Let me throw this away. And this is an image, Ron, you recognize this. This is, can't remember the name of the place. This is outside of Joplin in Missouri when we went on the insane trip. There's a couple of things I wanted to talk about with channels, and we're going to start, and I'm just going to do a select subject, and it's going to try to pick out what the subject is, and we're just going to accept whatever it gives us. Okay, so we're going to say this is the subject, and if you go to select, save selection, and then name it, you can name it whatever you want to call it. I'm going to call it initial selection. You save it. What that actually does is it creates a channel. So now if I come over here and in your panels over here, I typically keep the channels panel over here with layers. Now, if you don't have it, you can go to Windows and go to Channels and click on it, and it will open up that panel. So what I'm going to do is open up Channels here, and you'll notice it says Initial Selection down here. So all you're doing whenever you create a selection and save it is you're creating another channel in here that you can use later. And if I want to bring that selection back, all I got to do is click, hold down Command or Control, and click on it, and it brings that selection back. Okay. You can do that, or you can come back in here to select, load selection, and then it asks for which channel. You just tell it initial, and you open it up, and there you go. So you got your channel or your selection again. So what I'm saying, the reason I'm bringing this up is for two reasons. If you are creating a selection for any reason, and it's taking you a while, and you're sitting here and you're painstakingly making it just perfect, and you spent the last 45 minutes or hour or whatever creating it, and you don't want to have to go through all that again, and you just can save your selection, and it creates a channel, and it's there forever until you delete it. So it's really nice. Change my thing here. It's really nice for that purpose. And I used to tell people that when you created a selection and you saved it, it was only there during the session. And somebody told me, no, it's not. And they were right. It saves it over here as a channel. And I didn't realize that for quite some time. So what are these channels over here anyway? And I'm going to take these, I'm going to throw this away, and I'm going to throw this away. And I'm going to look at these channels over here. And basically your RGB channel is your red, green, and blue all blended together to give you your color. Okay, so that's what this is. If I click on my red channel, these are the red pixels, or the red from RGB. These are all of the values in your image that make up the red channel. So again, if you remember that RGB from the info panel, when I'm selecting here, it's showing you all of the, now you're seeing all the numbers are the same because this is a grayscale. But this is your red channel showing all of your red is 119. Okay, and your red here is 207. Your red here is 77. So it creates a grayscale, but it's only of the, in order to make it grayscale, it's got to add all the other channels in there, but it's using the red values to show you what the red values are. Okay, so I don't know if that made sense, but these are the red pixels. Okay, then if you go to the green channel, these are the green pixels, and notice they're a little bit different shade of gray because they're not all the same as the red. And then if you go to the blue channel, it's even different. So how can I use this information to get what I'm looking for, or to get what I want, or to even know what I want? What you can do with this is you can create a selection from it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on this, and I'm going to say duplicate channel. And I'm just going to say copy, or okay. And it's going to give me a copy of the blue channel because I want to work on a copy. I don't ever want to work on one of the originals. So I turn this on, turn this off, and now I'm on the blue copy. Now what I want to do is I want to make these darker pixels even darker, and the lighter pixels even lighter. I want to work on the sky. I want to make the sky deeper. So if I come back over here to layers, I guess I have to select the RGB. If I come back over here, I want to make this sky even deeper. Make it, something that, or even replace it. But in this case, we're just going to work with what we have to make it a deeper color, or add more contrast is what I'm saying. So if I come back over here to channels and I work on the blue channel, and the reason I'm choosing the blue channel, by the way, is because the sky is more white compared to the rest of it. So I am looking for the one with the most contrast between what I want to change and what I don't want to change. So if you look at the green channel, there's not as much contrast. This is a little bit darker, and this is kind of the same color, and the red is kind of the same. It's even worse. So the blue channel is the one I want to use. So if I go to blue copy, now what I can do is I can actually come in here and make this a little darker and make this a little bit brighter so that I can get a better selection. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do Command L, which is your shortcut for levels. Now, some of you may remember that I said never, ever, ever use image adjustments and then all those adjustments there because they're all destructive. Use the layer adjustments always. Well, This is one of the exceptions because I cannot use an adjustment layer with channels. So I have to use the levels from the image adjustments and use levels. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to push it down here, and it's going to be creating the darker's darker. And then I'm going to take this and I'm going to push it this way, and it's making the sky brighter. Okay. Now, all I'm really worried about is the sky and this. I'm not worried about anything down here at the bottom. So I'll push this black back over here because I want this to be a little bit more defined. I may pull this back over a little bit. There we go. So now I've got something. It's not perfect, but it's got something that gives me an edge here and gives me an edge around this, an edge in here, and it also maintains my see-through here in the glass. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay. Okay. Now, if I wanted to, I could come in here with a brush and darken this and darken, you know, get real precise and everything. So I could come in here with the black brush, go over here and change this to black, and just come in here and paint, because all I'm doing is taking away this as a selection. It's not going to be, I don't want it to be confusing. Now I can leave this if I want to, or I can take it away. You have to decide here. This is a reflection of this over here, so I'm probably going to leave it. And you just kind of take the rest of this away so that this, when the selection comes up, it's not confusing. Come in here, make it a little bit bigger. And I could even do this sign here. Now I've got a big brush. I created a big brush so that you guys could see it. And it's a lot harder to paint precise with this, with a bigger brush, or a bigger cursor, I should call it. And then I can come in here and I can paint this like this. And I'll leave the reflection there, and I can paint this away. And I don't have to get too, I'm not too worried about this because it's not going to make a lot of difference. Okay, and I'll get rid of this too. What the heck? I'm here, may as well. So what am I doing? I'm creating a selection. So now what I can do is I can press my command or control key and click on the icon here, and it gives me a selection. I don't know if you can see those marching ants, but it gives me a selection even around these trees here. So I can come back over to my layers. Oops, sorry. You have to get back to RGB channel. Turn this off and go to layers and create an adjustment layer. And we can do curves or layers. It doesn't really matter. I mean, levels, it doesn't really matter. And it creates that selection for you automatically when you have it selected. Otherwise, you can go in and do a command click and then fill it with black, that sort of thing. So what am I going to do? I'm going to come in here and I'm going to push this down here. What it's doing is whatever I do, it's going to show through the white area here in the image. So this mask is masking off this right here so that nothing in this gets affected except for the sky and this little area right here. So I'm going to push this down here, and see how it's darkening the sky? So I'm adding a little bit of contrast to it like that. Okay? And it didn't do anything to the trees down here. Now, if you zoom in, you're going to see that there's a little bit of haloing on the tree. So you don't want to go too far with it. You have to kind of, you can either go ahead and do that and then come back and brush a little bit of that out, or you can pull it back. But if you look at the sky in general, it didn't have any effect on any of this. If there is a little bit of haloing, then you can go in and adjust your selection, because I kind of went overboard with darkening it. But that is a good way to use channels as well. This is called luminosity masking. And if you come over here to your channels and you don't have a good selection with red, green, and blue, then you can create additional channels based on those. And there is a young man named, I don't know how young he is, I should call him a man, a guy named Greg Benz, that has created free luminosity masking that you can download. and his name's Greg, B-E-N-Z, Benz. And he is kind of a master, I guess, of luminosity mask, and he teaches this stuff online of how to create these kind of masks with your channels. But basically you can download his free luminosity mask, and if you click here and create, it creates an additional bunch of channels down here that are a little bit adjustments of these other channels, so that the blue channel might be a little bit more of what you're looking for. Or I mean, one of these additional channels might be a little bit closer to what you're looking for than using the blue channel. But I thought the blue channel worked out pretty well. So anyway, that is luminosity masking in a nutshell. And that is a way to use channels for that. Any questions on that? That's pretty involved there, but I just kind of wanted to give you the concept. You can see it's a lot of haloing here in these trees. So if you can't go too far with it without getting something like that, then you have to go in there and kind of play with it to, you know, go in there with a soft brush at low opacity and start painting around on it to get rid of that. So
I know I watched you do that once and it went right over my head. Now, if I can remember this, it will make my life simpler.
well, there's always the recording. You can always go back and watch this again. So I wasn't sure what you were asking. I was pretty sure it was this, but I thought, well, I'll talk about channels in general and lead up to this. So the important thing is to, you know, from channels, understand the basic part of it. What are the channels? Are, you know, red, green, and blue, and that each one of them represents a value between 0 and 255, because it shows a very, very dark red or very, very light red and green and blue, and all of those combined together create all your colors. So the channels over here then represent those pixels in those color channels. So one more thing I just wanted to talk about with channels is that your levels and your curves also you can adjust based on channels. So if I wanted to take this, and I'm going to really mess it up, but if I wanted to change the red channel in this entire image, I could take this and move it to darken the reds in here, and it's probably going to mess that up quite a bit. My computer is running low on memory here, so it's kind of jumping around. Move that over here. And see how it turned this kind of a greenish color? One thing to think about is opposites. If you think about red, green, blue, what are their opposites? The opposite of red is cyan. So if I'm pushing red this way, I'm reducing red, but I'm adding cyan. What color is cyan? Cyan's kind of a greenish blue, and that's what you see here, is a greenish blue being introduced here. If I pull it this way, you're going to increase the red. See how I increase the red there? So you can play with the channels in each one of these. Maybe you want a little bit of a red tint to those clouds. You can do it that way, and of course you can do it with the midtones as well. Play around with that. If I wanted to play with the green, what's the opposite of green? It's magenta. So magenta is the same way. If I pull the greens down, you're going to see these trees go into kind of a purplish blue color. Well, you can see it on the clouds too. But there we go. So I'm introducing magenta by pushing the greens down like this. Now those clouds have green in them, believe it or not. So that's why you see that color changing like that. Now, the reason you don't see it on the rest of this is because I got it masked here. So just keep that in mind. It's only showing it on the sky. And then if I wanted to play with blue, you got the same kind of thing. What's the opposite of blue? Is yellow. Yeah, so how do you know what opposites are? RGB, CMY. Remember, CMYK? CMY. So opposite of red is C, which is cyan. Opposite of green is magenta, which is M. Opposite of blue is yellow, which is Y. So CMY, RGB, those are opposites. So if I want to introduce yellow, I push this in here, and you should see some yellow popping in there. There you go. See that yellow coming in? Because I'm introducing a lot of yellow. If I push this over, then I'm adding some blue back. So the channels, you can play with the channels in levels, and you can also do it in curves as well. You just use the drop down here. Now, of course, you also have other adjustment layers in here that you can use, such as channel mixer. Now, channel mixer right off the bat is about channels. We're looking at, here are your different channels here, and you can play with the colors in your channels. So in this case, I've got blue at 100%, I mean red, I'm sorry, because I'm in the red channel. If I want to introduce some green in the red channel, I can push this over. Now it's getting everything because I don't have a mask on there. I can also reduce the blue, which adds yellow. I'm reducing the green, which adds what? It adds magenta. If I reduce the reds, it's going to add cyan, which is kind of a bluish color. So you can play with these, and this is all adjustments in the red channel. If you go to the green channel, then you can also do some adjustments in there. Green is 100. So do I want to add some red or reduce some red? If I add red, it adds red to the green channels. Or I can go this way. So if you remember, these, I mean, I never use this. I never use the channel mixer. I use it, I do different ways. But this is something that you could do to play with the channels. And then you have this down here that you can darken all of the colors, and you're in the green channel. So you're introducing magenta, or you're introducing green. So you can get some pretty wild stuff here in the channel mixer. But you also then have, where is it? Color balance. There we go. So you have color balance, and you can do it based on shadows, highlights, or midtones. And you're looking at the different channels. In here, if you're looking at the midtones, I can add red to the midtones. I can reduce red, which is adding cyan. This helps you understand the opposites. And then if you wanted to reduce the green, you're introducing magenta. So you can see the green go away here. It becomes a different color. And then add more yellow or add more blue. So it helps you, and preserved luminosity means, of course, that it's retaining its brightness or darkness. So you know, this is just another way that you can use channels. Go into highlights, same thing, add reds to the highlights, add some green to the highlights, add some blue to the highlights, and now you have highlights like this. Okay, and you have shadows. So you've got all of these different areas that you can adjust using your channels. The only other area that I can think of is,
Bob,
yes.
why is your mask not being applied? I don't follow that.
Your mask is not applied. Yeah, but it's here. It's not on the channel mixer or the color balance. If I want it there, I can drag it. I can drag it up here, or I can also clip it here, and now they're all only applying to the sky.
Yep, got it.
Okay. The other area where you can play with channels is in here, where you have your different channels that you can work with. So if I turn this off and go to reds, now I can come in here to my reds, and I can play with the reds. Actually, yeah, there we go. So I can reduce the lighter reds here, or I can come in like this, and I can have this red, and then I can turn this on and turn this on. And now what I've done is I've removed this part of the red channel. I removed everything between 0 and 132 value of red in this image. Okay, so just another way of playing with channels over here. I never use this either, but it's here for you to, you know, if you wanted to get involved with channels. So I think that's it. Any questions on channels? I mean, that's quite a bit to swallow. That's why I started off, and I'm sure that whenever you saw me starting, you're going, yeah, I know that. But if you don't know that, or if you don't think about, those pixels, then you don't really understand this here. So, any questions? We actually got through pretty quick. I knew that it wouldn't take long for the layer styles, but I didn't know how long this would take. But anyway, this is a pretty good way of getting a cutout or a extraction, or just affecting a certain part of your image. If I just wanted to affect this part of my image right here, I could go over here and find a channel that had the biggest amount of contrast between this area and all the areas around it, and select it, and then I could just disregard everything else and apply my adjustment to that. So you don't have to use the entire image. You can get little pieces. I could do these trees down here, just these trees in the sky. I could do just little bits and pieces of the image and create a channel and create a mask from that channel. And that's kind of the way that Greg teaches it, and others, not just Greg, but everybody else. There's several others out there that are big gurus, I guess you would say, on channels. I mean, on luminosity masking, and it's actually not as hard as you might think once you've done it a few times. Go ahead.
Curious. I don't think I ever knew that all of your save selections were under channels. I'm positive I didn't know that. What I do is I go to select, save channel, and name it. And then when I want to retrieve it, I go to select, load channel. Load selection. So I don't need to do that. I can just go to channels and it'll be there.
Yes. And all you have to do is hold down your command or control key and click on it, and it creates your marching ants for you.
Yeah.
So that's all you got to do.
Cool.
And it's easy either way. I still usually use the load selection, but it's pretty simple to come over here and do it. You don't have to bring down your menu. You just come over here and click on channels and go for it. So, any other questions or comments?
Hey, Bob, if we could go back to the original, when you were showing the various, attributes that you can do to a layer.
Oh, layer styles?
Yeah. Is there a way to abstract that so that you can just save what you've done there, or is it always abstracted all the way back down to the PSD file?
So you mean you could use it on another image?
Yeah, without finding an image that has it and then dragging it over.
Sure. Yeah, I was going to go through this next time, but I'll show you right now.
Okay. No, that's fine.
It's very simple. It's very simple.
Okay.
And I'll show you. You have a window, and it's called Styles.
Okay.
You open the styles. These are all of the styles. These come with Photoshop. These are ones that you can save yourself. So if you click this, it's looking at the layer that you're on and the styles that you have.
Okay, great.
Click this and name it. We'll call it Bob's layer style. And whoops, if I could type. And then, do you want to include all the effects? Do you want to include layer blending options?
Oh, nice. Okay.
You want to add it to my library? You've got all those different options. If you select OK, now it's in here. So now, if I wanted to come in here and create a new layer, let's turn this off. And let's create another text. Oops, text. Okay, and let's just create something here. And we'll call it Bob. Okay, and then I come up here and click on this. It applies that to it.
Very nice. Okay. Okay, because
So-
I've seen people do that very quickly, and I'm like, what are they doing? Now,
And
will that
there's one-
skip? I'm
Go ahead.
sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. What's your question?
Will that be backed up to the Adobe Cloud, or do I need to make sure I'm getting?
No, that
what
goes
is it?
into your definitions. So it goes the same place that all of your actions and all that kind of stuff
Okay.
goes. It goes into their preferences.
Okay.
Now, the other thing I was going to show you is that, let's say you wanted to do something special with this. I don't know, expand it or whatever. You can also come in here and say, oops, it's not there. I'm sorry. Let me come over here to layer. And I never do this, so I have to look for it. Style. Here, layer styles. You can say create layers. So if I click on that, oh, okay. Some of it can't be done. But if I say okay, it's going to save my patterns and my gradient fill as a separate layer so that you can work with those. If I wanted to take this, for example, and you can do this in layer styles, but why not, just kind of show it here. And I wanted to say expand it out to make it look different. I could do something like that because it's on its own separate layer now. Or if I wanted to turn it,
Very nice.
again, you can do whatever with it.
Yeah.
So,
Very cool.
so that's just something else that you can do. Okay. Anything else? No other questions? Okay. No other questions. Well, I'm going to go back here and let's see. How do I unshare? Stop share. There we go. And we got everybody back. We lost a few on the way, but all right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. This is going to be, it's automatically been recorded. I am actually leaving to go out of town tomorrow for almost a week. So I may get this uploaded to YouTube. Nana, if you send me an email or message me, my email is bob@bobwoodfin.com. And you can see my name spelled. I think you can see it spelled underneath my picture there. So it's just bob@bobwoodfin.com. And I will send you the YouTube link. And anybody else that doesn't know or isn't part of the YouTube, the Facebook group. And Nana, you can become part of the Facebook group if you want to. And I'll tell you how to do that. You go to RTPC, Rowlett Texas Photography Club Facebook group and ask to join that. And once you join that, then we can join you into our Photoshop Learning group. So that's all there is to it. But send me an email and I'll send you all the information. And on the Facebook group, I'll put the link to the YouTube. I'll try to get it up tonight. If not, it will probably go up in another week when I get back. Okay? Everybody good? Our next meeting is next week on Thursday night. We're going to do a summary of the layer styles. And if I have time, I want to talk about creating brushes because creating brushes is really cool. And there are some things that you can do with brushes that you may not have thought of. So, okay, we good?
Thanks, Bob.
Appreciate it, Bob.
All right, thanks.
Catch you next time, brother.
You bet. Goodbye. I want to sign a new host. I just want to get out.